Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Sorry. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Praja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajagacharya Astotra Stotra Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Damodar Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when Ramapad Swami mentioned the idea of having this retreat, these were the exact words that came out of my mouth. Maharaj, are we really going to talk about Varnasrama? And it immediately reminded me of, because His Holiness Ramapad Maharaj, when we have our North American GBC meetings, usually in Chicago, he organizes the classes. And so that last year he organized the classes where Shiva Maharaj spoke via video during one class about Varnashram, and then Anuttama Prabhu spoke the other class about Varnashram. And Anuttama Prabhu, if you know him, he's the Minister of Communications, and so he wanted to present a balanced view, and a few times he voiced a concern about the way Varnashram is presented, that if people get the idea, basically he said if people get the idea that this is we're promoting the caste system, then we're finished, in his view. And he mentioned a few other cautionary notes. So he told me recently that, well, actually, some time ago, he mentioned to me that after that, he got an interesting email. And the email had an attachment. It had a picture of a brahmachari from Eastern Europe, who was the author of the email, wearing a dhoti and a chadar. And in the email was very short, and the email basically voiced their dislike for Anuttama Prabhu's class, and said, "You see that I'm wearing a chadar. I will never wear a kurta again until you are off the GBC." So then I thought, well, maybe I should talk about Varnashram, because I don't know anything about Varnashram, but I know a good conflict when I see one. For those of you who might not, that's my service. I do conflict resolution. So it's true. I don't know much about Varnashram. I grew up in New York, and not only did I wasn't even pious enough to grow up in the city. I grew up in the protected suburbs of Long Island. And the only thing I knew about farming is I think one time we went strawberry picking in a strawberry grove. That was about my extent of understanding farms. And I literally must have thought milk came from A&P, which was a grocery store in those days. So I don't know much about Varnashram. Oh, my other qualification besides knowing a good conflict when I see one is I know how to use folio. Those are my two claims to fame. So what I was hoping we'd have a flip chart by now, but we won't. So let me just ask you, what are some reasons why, oh, there's a flip chart, but it may not be set up in time, and I'm not going to delay it for that. Why is it that Varnashram is I don't know if we should use the word controversial, but it's a issue that even some people call it the V word, right? We don't talk about the V word. Why is it an issue? What is the conflict? What is the dispute? What is the concerns about Varnashram? Abhiram Prabhu. I think we don't have to run around. I'll just repeat. I'll repeat it. So.
I think the concerns are that we don't understand how to do it.
Okay, we don't understand how to do it. Implementation is a concern. What else? Yes? We equate it with a caste system.
It seems like it's only applicable for rural settings, so us city dwellers, and we have services in the cities, how do we apply it in our own settings?
It seems like it's only really meant for rural settings, and how do us preachers and people born in New York apply it in that setting? Jayadvaita Maharaj. It has 3 ashrams other than Grihastha. Really? Just, yeah. I forgot about that. Yes. What we don't know what it, we have different definitions of the term. Excellent. Yes.
We equate it with the ancient regular Varnasrama, which has so many, which is actually more like karma kanda,
We equate it with karma kanda, things like the ancient Varnasrama.
and don't understand the difference between that and the Devi Varnasrama.
And we don't understand the difference between that and Daivi Varnasrama.
And the main difference or confusion is Srila Prabhupada's contradictory, so-called contradictory instruction
And
at 3 different times.
And Srila Prabhupada's so-called contradictory explanations and discussions about Varnashrama at 3 different times. Thank you. We'll take a few more. Yes? We have right to a Varna depending on our birth. Yes? The conception that the Brahmanas wrote the Varnashram system so that they could be on top. Okay? We can just hear and chant, why do we need these social concerns? Yes? People can engage according to their qualification. That's okay. We'll take a few more. We already heard from you, Mataji. Yes? The connection between Varnashram and the goal of life. Okay. Okay. We get the Gayatri mantra, therefore we all think we're Brahmins. Okay. Good. Well, I made my own list, and you guys came out, you Prabhus and Prabhis, whatever the correct Varnashram term is, came up with some ones that I hadn't thought about. But we're going to pretty much, actually I'm going to start with Mataji's one. This was the list that I came up with, and you can read them there. This slide appears 2 or 3 times. So can you read that, by the way? Is it big enough type? Yes? No? Okay. We're going to talk about the first one first, which is Srila Prabhupada spoke differently about it. So I just want you to know a little bit about my method of research, because we're going to have Tukaram Prabhu here, who actually really studied Prabhupada's words. My method of research was, on Wednesday, I was flying from Denver to Washington, and because I'm a frequent flyer for my work, I travel like half the time I'm in an airplane. So I get to board the airplane first, right, or near the beginning, right? So I got in my seat, I opened up my computer, went to Folio, and I did this research between the time I got in my seat and by the time the flight attendant said, close your computers, we're going to take off. So it was about 15 minutes of research. So this was not in depth, but look what I came up with, 15 minutes. I simply typed in the words Varnashram and possible, those 2 words, okay? So, and we should be willing to talk about this. Prabhupada mentions in the Adi Leela that a sincere student should not neglect discussion of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus one's mind becomes attached to Sri Krishna. Okay? So this is about farms. So Prabhupada, I'm sorry I guess I have to read this out because, okay. If I am able to travel again, Srila Prabhupada writes, then I shall visit the farms and make them perfect. On these farms we shall demonstrate the full Varnashram system. If these farms become successful, then the whole world will be enveloped by Krishna consciousness. Next quote. Regarding the farm opening is not very essential, but if you can do it conveniently, then do it. The Varnashram system is for convenience sake in the material world. It has nothing to do with spiritual life. Acceptance of Varnashram means a little easy progress to spiritual life, otherwise it has no importance to us. And then I went on to just Varnashram in general, Prabhupada writes, then we have to introduce this Varnashram Dharma. It must be done perfectly. It is possible, and people will be happy. And then I just looked at a few more clicks, and the Varna and Ashram Society was considered to be the best institution for lifting the human being to the spiritual platform, but due to Kali Yuga, it is not possible to execute the rules and regulations of this institution.
Can I make one quick observation? Is it possible that the chronology of these quotes that you're coming up with have something that would help us understand this part of the controversy?
Yes, and that'll be Tukaram's job. All I'm trying to show is that you're a casual reader of Srila Prabhupada's books and letters and hearing his lectures probably wouldn't make that distinction, and therefore that's what sometimes causes the confusion. Although I'll add to that it doesn't completely fit into chronology if you actually, I'll leave that up to Tukaram Prabhu. Okay? So I'm just trying to show here that 15 minutes on a computer and you can see differences, so you can understand how sometimes devotees reading Srila Prabhupada's books, not looking at it chronologically in the presentation that we'll probably hear today from Tukaram Prabhu, may get a little confused. No luxuries. Live simple life, and you save time for chanting Hare Krishna. That is my desire. Don't waste time for bodily comforts. You have got this body, but you have to eat something. You have to cover yourself. So produce your own food and produce your own cloth. Don't waste time for luxury and chant Hare Krishna. Don't be allured by the machine civilization. Now this next quote, I'll just say, I knew this one because I teach Nectar of Devotion a lot, and it wasn't from the folio search. But I remembered it said, gosh, that's a great quote because it talks about civilization and it talks about comforts. The Nectar of Devotion is not presented to condemn any way of materialistic life, but the attempt is to give information to religionists, philosophers, and people in general how to love Krishna. One may live without material discomforture, but at the same time, he should learn the art of loving Krishna. And one more. The Varnashram College has to be established immediately. Everywhere, wherever we have got our center, a Varnashram College should be established to train 4 divisions. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he knew that this is Kali Yuga. It is very, very difficult to engage people strictly in the Varnashram Dharma. If you open a Varnashram college, there will be no student because they will think, what is this nonsense Varnashram? So that's just, I just doing this again to address Vatsal Prabhu's concerns. It was just a quick thing to just, it took me 15 minutes. And just to show you that as we read Prabhupada's books, we may, there's differences. And when I thought about those differences, I was already practicing Krishna consciousness, but when I was at the University of Michigan, I was really into studying New England literature. And even did something called a New England Literature Program where we went to New Hampshire and studied Emerson, Thoreau, Dickinson, Frost, etc. And this quote always stuck in my mind. I know it's not, I think it's a pretty good quote. Emerson said, a foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. Because we saw Srila Prabhupada Mataji was even using the word so-called inconsistent, right? It's a hobgoblin of little minds adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do. He may as well concern himself with his shadow on the wall. Speak what you think now in hard words. Speak what moral things in hard words again. Though it contradict everything you said today. So you shall be sure you misunderstood. Is it so bad that misunderstood? Pythagoras misunderstood, and Socrates and Jesus and Luther and Copernicus and Galileo and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever flesh. Of course, we know that Srila Prabhupada never so-called contradicted himself when presenting Siddhanta and presenting the basic philosophy of Krishna. He didn't one day say, Lord Shiva seems to be supreme today, or something along those lines. No, but according to time, place, and circumstance, great souls will adjust things. So that's one way to understand these different statements. Again, as Vatsal Prabhu is pointing out, that there may be a chronology to this, where Srila Prabhupada was adjusting things as he was preaching and saw the need to adjust. So that's just addressing the first one. We define it differently, right? Sometimes we define it as Krishna's system. Some people seem to define it more as Manu Smriti on varnas and genders. Then other people say, well, Srila Prabhupada had a different definition than Manu Smriti. Some people define it as a caste system, farm life, external, the discussion between Ramananda Roy and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What was it? What was the word? Thank you. So we define it differently. We have different attitudes toward Varnashram. I just did this in a brainstorm again on the airplane. Horrible caste system, it's already everywhere. Prabhupada wanted it. It's a distraction from pure bhakti. It's needed to practice to attain pure bhakti. It establishes the position of women. It's for rural development. It can be practiced in the cities. Srila Prabhupada would have adjusted his emphasis, in other words, if he had seen ISKCON as it changed after his disappearance, he would have made more adjustments. As we were hearing from Vatsal, he made certain chronological adjustments. Well, some people say he would have made more chronological adjustments. Shastra encourages it, Shastra discourages it. It'll ruin our preaching, it'll be great for our preaching. Depends on how we present Varnashram and how it will affect our preaching. It has nothing to do with the average household devotee. It has everything to do with the average household devotee. We already have ashrams pretty established, with Varnaprastha a bit unclear. We should work on improving ashrams first before getting into Varnas. We have to figure out what Varna doctors, IT specialists, and engineers are, so we have 75% of ISKCON in North America figured out. So that's another reason why it's a conflict sometimes, because we have, these are, I'm sure there's more. This is, again, a short brainstorm flying over Nebraska or something like that. So let's go down the list a little bit more. Some take extreme positions, right, when they're talking about Varnashram or where they're talking against Varnashram, and that causes conflict. Usually, it just is an interesting tidbit of information. Usually, in any organization, there's 10 to 20% on either extreme, and 60 to 80% more moderate, right? But what often happens is, because the extremes are very loud, leadership and management often focuses on the extremes, sometimes at the neglect of the vast majority, the 60 to 80%. Just an interesting statistic. People fear one vision prevails, right? If someone gives a class today and says, we need Varnashram in every temple and a Varnashram college in every temple, and some temple president hears that and says, oh my God, I can barely pay the bills, and we're trying to do some book distribution, we're trying to take care of the deities, and now that, and how am I going to explain this to the, and so fear that one vision will prevail. Or on the opposite, we don't, to heck with Varnashram. Prabhupada would have adjusted it, and we should just, teach nectar of devotion and Harinam and forget about this Varnashram nonsense. And other people, that causes conflict for those who are very attached to Srila Prabhupada's instructions on Varnashram. So sometimes that fear that only one vision is there, really, I've seen that in many different aspects of ISKCON. I've seen that sometimes create conflicts. Previous efforts. There was a famous book, or infamous book, that came out in the 1980s called Varnashram Manifesto by Harikesh Prabhu, and which was later, actually, he even himself at one point rejected it. And it was quite extreme, people said, and the devotees, anyway, some previous efforts at writing about it have caused conflict. I'm sure some of the Prabhupada disciples here remember back that book and what did, yes. Foreign idea to most of us, right? Often we came to ISKCON because, Krishna's holy name, Krishna's so beautiful, the philosophy of the Bhagavatam, and then Varnashram, what? The medium that we use for discussing it, right? And this is pretty much for any topic in ISKCON. We often use email, right? Email is just about the worst medium possible. When I go into either at work, I work for the Department of the Interior as the ombudsman, or in ISKCON, the first thing I say to an office or to an ISKCON community is, if you want me to help with this conflict, no more emails about this conflict, right? Because, you know, it's 11 o'clock at night, steam's coming out of your ears, your keyboard's on fire, and you type things that normally you wouldn't say to a person face to face, then you click send, and you think, oh my God, did I just send that? And then the person either gets it later that night or early the next morning, and it's just a downward spiral. It's like, it reminds me of that when Srila Prabhupada talks about one kind of discipline that teachers used to use in his day, where if two children were mischievous, they would face each other and they would hold each other's ear, right? And so as one pulls down, that causes more pain to that one, so he pulls down harder on him, and it gets harder and harder, because, yeah. So the medium for discussion is sometimes, that's why, you know, something like this, much better atmosphere, much better place to have this kind of discussion, certainly than just writing papers and emails. Identity, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. And then this point that kind of came up, preach from the platform of being part of society versus preach from the platform of being apart from society. I thought you liked that play on words there a little bit. So we have differences. It causes some differences. Now, I think I'm looking at the time. When do I go till? Anyone? Oh, okay, we have plenty of time. All right, so then we're going to take just a slight detour. Actually not a detour, it's applicable, but we're going to give Conflict Resolution 101, okay? And talk a little bit about that, because it applies to this topic. So it's important to know conflict is a neutral term. It can be, it depends on our attitude towards it. And actually better relationships are on the far side of conflict. If conflicts are resolved well, then you have actually better, and I've seen that, and especially in ISKCON where we have Vaishnavas who don't really want to be upset with one another. So what should be our attitude towards conflict? I use these next two slides, especially when training managers and leaders in ISKCON. Whoops. So, you know, should we get all bent out of shape, panic, start becoming critical of devotees? Or, you know, oh my God, ISKCON's in trouble, you know, geez, you know, these devotees are upset with each other, oh, you know. A lot of devotees are conflict averse, right? They just, you know, they prefer not to deal with it. And even a lot of our managers and leaders would prefer not to deal with conflict. Or should we be calm, empathetic, have, you know, good, clear, and strong thinking, not affected by fear and anxiety, etc. Be respectful, be a good listener, and of course, especially, you know, see Krishna's hand in what's going on in all aspects of our life. So this is there's a book by. Last name is Moore, M-O-O-R-E. It's kind of like the Bible for mediators. And he lists 5 different causes for conflicts. The easier ones to resolve are on the left, the harder ones on the right. Information, resources, relationships, structures, and values. I'll just go briefly through each one. Conflicts about information. We may lack sufficient information, or as I was trying to show in those quotes, we may be only exposed to quotes on one side of an issue. For example, if one reads the first canto, one is going to hear more or listens to Prabhupada's earlier lectures, as Vatsala Prabhu again was pointing out. We're going to hear one approach to Varnasrama, right? And in some other places, especially Course Morning Walks in 1974 and Srila Prabhupada's discussions in 1977 and what he told Abhiram Prabhu, etc., we're going to hear something else. So sometimes you're exposed to one thing, and we're supposed to, right? We were singing just now, Guru Guru Mukha what is it? Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Koreyakya Aranar Korim. I have no other desire than to accept the words of my spiritual master as my life and soul. So then the only question is which words? Right, so being exposed to only one of them is going to be like, oh yeah, I heard Prabhupada say, it is impossible in this age of Kali. What is this? I saw it in my own eyes. I heard it on a lecture. Then we may have different interpretations of the quotes and Shastra. And then we may have different views of what information is relevant. Right? This is an example from how do you measure the progress of a yatra? Number of Sunday feast guests, the Sankirtan scores, how the deities are worshipped. Right? We may have different views of what information is important. Okay? So that leads us into conflicts about, so that's the conflicts about information. Those are usually the easiest ones to solve because then you can present other information and you say, oh, Prabhu, Prabhupada also said this. Oh. Okay. Over resources. We never have conflicts about resources in ISKCON, right? Right, Jayadvaita Maharaj? We never have conflicts about resources. Never, right? Resources over land, over money, over manpower. Usually conflicts occur when resources are felt to be insufficient or limited. Should we fix up the brahmachari ashram or buy the deities a new outfit? We only have so much money. Well, the pujari is going to say one thing. The brahmachari ashram leader is going to say something else. There might be some conflict over that if there's only a certain pot of money. Right? Conflicts over relationships, of course, that never happens. Although I just mentioned here, since we know it happens, that even though the conflict may not be about the relationship as such, the relationships have some impact on it, and especially on the ability to resolve that issue. And then structures. Who has access to power, who has access to resources, how decisions are made. This is something that Kaunteya Prabhu is working, practically dedicating his life to, is trying to make better structures. I can remember, this goes back, oh gosh, I'm embarrassed to say, 1982? I don't know how many years ago that is, but it's a long time ago. I was a Sankirtan leader in Detroit, and I had inherited that from somebody else, and there was a program where whoever did best for we used to call it the Christmas Marathon in those days, whoever was number one in the Christmas Marathon got to go to India. All expense paid trip to India, right? And I could see that during that marathon, there wasn't a very nice mood amongst the devotees. Like, devotees were upset when someone did well, right? Because they were thinking, oh, that guy, that person's going to go to India and I'm not going to go. So I looked at that and somehow got the idea for the next Christmas marathon. What I did was I set a very high goal, almost impossible to reach. And I said, if we all reach that goal together, then we all go to India. And I made it enough so there'd be enough funds for the air travel for all the Sankirtan devotees. And that changed the entire atmosphere. Right? Everyone was so happy when someone else did really well, and and it just created this kind of synergistic, and actually we all went to India that year. The year before, I won't tell you what happened. I went to India because I got a donation from my mother, and it put me ahead of this one Mataji. Anyway, truth be told, I apologized to her 30 years later. So conflicts over the way things are set up can cause conflicts. And then the toughest one is conflicts over values. See, so we say our values are formed by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but, aren't they also formed by our life experiences and by the culture we grew up in, perhaps the way we were trained in our early days of Krishna consciousness, our purva samskars, our impressions from previous lives, etc. These are difficult, like I said. Often people become defensive. That point about, if there's only one way that ISKCON direction is going, then people become defensive about that. and challenges to a value are taken as a threat to a person or group's identity. So then people often withdraw to preserve their identity. This point about identity, it's going to come up in the next slide, actually, but I'll mention it here that, so you imagine someone comes to ISKCON, and, you know, like I remember my wife telling me that one of the things that struck her the most and that attracted her to Krishna consciousness was that she wasn't her body and that she actually wasn't a woman ultimately. And she found that just so liberating, right? So, you know, that whole idea of and chanting Hare Krishna, and for her that was so inspiring. Then someone else comes, and maybe they came from a culture that was at least somewhat similar to Varnasrama, and they saw ISKCON as something that was instilling the traditional Vedic principles practically better than any other society. And they read Srila Prabhupada's statements on Varnasrama, and that included, you know, social systems, and that's what's really inspired them. And so these two people joined the same organization. And they've invested a lot of their kind of identity into that. We do invest a lot of our identity into being a member of ISKCON, right? We, especially for these young men here, they change their hairstyle. We all wear sheets. The people that we hang out, the people that we associate with, what we eat, you know, we put a lot of our identity. So when you put so much into being a member of an organization, and then another person puts that much, and you have different views on things, they become quite intense. They have at least that potential to be so. Right, Brajalila? She's deals with these things all the time. Okay. Maybe, you know, I don't really want this to be just a lecture, so maybe now before I move on, well, actually, I'll just do one more slide, and then you can think if you have any questions up till now. There's a book called Managing Church Conflicts, and the author, Hugh Halverstadt, came up with 3 more, which I think to some extent, not completely relate to ISKCON. Certainly that first one, which we just mentioned, and sometimes unclear job descriptions. We have different expectations, what it means to be a temple president, what it means to be a GBC member, what it means to be a guru, what it means to be a sannyasi, what it means to be so many things. So here they mention the differences between paid staff and volunteers. That is often, we have that in some of our temples, but I would think in general, just unclear descriptions of what it means to be. Again, I look at Countaya Prabhu because he's been working for a number of years now and trying to define what is the job description of a GBC. And I remember when he came up with a draft, one GBC said, well, then I shouldn't be a GBC anymore because that's not my understanding of what the job description is. Remember that? So, and then this tension that, again, I don't know how much this prevails in ISKCON, in many churches, between people wanting a peaceful, pious life and what they call radical discipleship, or what we might say, you know, quoting Prabhupada, you know, what is it? Just like in wartime, the bombs are dropping in the sky like anything. He compared that to book distribution and the whole idea of going out and preaching. I can remember this when I was a brahmachari, and I spent 11 years driving around living in a van. And when I would go back to the temple, which I tried to avoid a lot, and I looked at those fallen householders, I would say, they're pushing their, kids around and stuff like that. Little did I know that the tables might turn one day. So any comments up to now? Yes, Shiradika. How's your husband feeling, by the way? He's still sick.
Prabhu, we're so used to coming to these retreats and getting very authoritative, very clear, direction or statement or about, the subject matter. Now, this is a very different kind of retreat. The last session and this session is requires a complete paradigm shift because, we're hearing something that it seems like, there's not so much clarity about or there's controversy about. So I'm used to having like a learning objective or a, beginning with the end in mind kind of approach to coming to retreats. Would you please comment
Yeah, I think you went to the wrong, you decided on the wrong way to spend your Labor Day weekend.
I feel very fortunate to be here.
Well, I'll skip ahead to a nice quote about this. Oops, where is it? Oh, yes. This is sometimes attributed to Srila Prabhupada. It is not from Srila Prabhupada. It is from F. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. Now, having said that, we may, at the end, tie this all together. What is the philosopher, was it Hegel, who had thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, right? Was that Hegel? Anyone know? Yeah? Yes. So we may come to a synthesis by the end of the weekend. So make sure you stay till the end, even though I know you have a 13-hour drive back to St. Louis. Okay. Double think. Was he saying it in a derogatory sense? So who should we follow, Orwell or Fitzgerald? Or Prabhupada? Oh, okay, guys, wise guys. See, that's the synthesis is Prabhupada. Okay, great. Other comments, questions? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. The debate about Varnasrama that you're very nicely describing reminds me a bit of the debate about climate change. There's different perspectives on it, and there's it's a very surcharged topic. And because one end of the spectrum, it's like we have to change very quickly, and the other end of the spectrum is
Donald Trump.
It's a hoax, don't worry. And I guess using the example of climate change, if you hold the view that, well, both simultaneously might be right, it's like, well, what do we do? So I just sort of
yes, there are such things. Even in conflict resolution, we use the word zero-sum game, when it's just, it's either guilty or not guilty, or, there's only so much that you can't just always, as we say, expand the pie and then have a win-win situation. Yeah, so there's we certainly know there's right and wrong, just like we were hearing yesterday about, meat eating is wrong, right? Breaking, so we have clear, Srila Prabhupada writes in the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, he makes the distinction between principles and details, right? And so we know principles are just those, they don't move. They're immovable, or they're meant to be immovable, right? And details can be adjusted according to time, place, and circumstance. So one time, it was Burijan Prabhu, he asked Srila Prabhupada, how do you know the difference? And this is another one of those answers. He said, that takes some intelligence. That was his answer. That's all, Prabhu?
Yeah. Are we trying to understand Varnasrama in terms of the whole ISKCON movement, or are we trying to understand it and apply it maybe in our sphere of influence?
Okay, thank you. Basically, this presentation is not about Varnasrama. What I'm trying to do is set the mood for the discussions about Varnasrama that we're going to be having today. So that would be a really good question to ask, for example, Tukaram Prabhu, who's done all these studies, or Abhiram Prabhu, who heard things from Srila Prabhupada directly, or Kauntaya Prabhu, who's going to be presenting, and who am I missing? You can't. Are we going to be able to ask Shivarama questions, or it's just at the end? Okay, those are good questions for those folks. I'm just trying to, what I just said. Pancharatna Prabhu.
In your presentation, you were indicating that conflicts over information are the easiest to resolve. But In our situation, it seems that that may not be so applicable, since we have the information that we're dealing with is constrained, it seems, to, well, we're only dealing with what Srila Prabhupada has said about Varnashram, and then we have problems within that. And then we have also the problem of how we, which is not just on Varnashram, but on many issues of how we interpret Srila Prabhupada.
Yes.
And we also have to deal with the question of whether Srila Prabhupada himself was experimenting or thinking or developing his thoughts.
Yes.
So there's a lot, it seems that that's not so easy.
Because, and usually it's because information is there's a bit of a kitchery going on, and it's mixed in with especially values, and often even resources. You know, you can change your mind real quick if money's involved. You ever notice that? Something that you're kind of against, if somebody says, well, listen, you know, we'll also give you so much money for yours. So, oh, okay, Varnashram, or whatever, you know, so-and-so's looking really good. So it could be a mixture of a few things. But we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, about that point about information. Okay? But you're right. We you know, because, or what does Ravindra Suprabhu call it? We can have Srila Prabhupada quote snowball fights. Right? You know, I throw a quote at you, and then you throw a quote back at me, without considering the context, the chronology, or, you know, or even just having a dispassionate approach to it. So I'm going to sally forth, and we'll stop in a little while for more questions. This is just a diagram, and you probably can't read it so well, but it's something I use sometimes in conflict resolution. In the bottom circle, it says the issue. The next one says relationships, subsystems, and then systems. So the issue, we might say, you know, should we establish Varnashram? How should we do it? That might be an issue. But then nested within that are our relationships, right? You know, we think, well, so-and-so's into such and such, and you know what so-and-so's like. Oh, my God, right? So, you know, relationships sometimes affect our view of an issue. And then sometimes, you know, subsystems can be defined differently. But it might be, what is the prevailing mood, let's say, towards Varnashram in that part of the ISKCON world? And then what may even be affecting that is what's the prevailing mood in that part of the world in general. And sometimes all of these affect the issue. So in dealing with conflicts, let's, you know, say, forget about Varnashram, but just in anything, I'm often thinking of all these levels and at which level to address it. Because if I only address the issue and don't address the relationship, let's say in a temple between the head pujari and the temple president, then usually 6 months later there's going to be another issue that pops up, and they're going to be at loggerheads. So it gives some ideas of where to address things and what's influencing a certain outcome. So this is Conflict Resolution 101, but it's a really simple but important point. There's two things, positions and interests. Positions are what we say we want, and interests or needs are what the reason behind it, the underlying desire, okay? So the idea is to try to go from positions and dig down, see that fancy graphic? To the interest, what's really driving it. So positions are easy to identify. Let's say there should be Varnashram, or there should be in farms only, or there should you know, whatever it is, people's positions are pretty clear, often, sometimes. Why? The interest underlying that, that may not always be so clear. Interests or needs are more subtle, and to be identified, they require us to probe deeper, ask questions, and verify. So the classic story in conflict resolution is there's one orange left in the household, and the son wants the orange, and the daughter wants the orange. So what does a good mother or father do? Cut it in half. Yes, cut it in half, right? 50-50, right? Makes sense. Their position was, I want the orange. Their position is, I want the orange. But if you would have asked, why do you want the orange? In other words, what was the interest? And the son says, I'm baking a cake and I need the outside, I need the rind, right, to put in the cake. And the daughter says, I'm catching a cold, I need the vitamin C, I need the juice, right? So if you would have asked why, right, the interest, then each could have gotten 100%. You could have given all the inside of the orange to the daughter, and you could have given all the outside of the orange to the son. That's, again, conflict resolution 101 is trying to go from what people are saying they want to the reasons behind it. Once you get to the reasons behind it, you can sometimes work out a lack of a better word, a win-win situation. I had one person tell me recently, if I hear you say win-win, I'm leaving this mediation right now. So, okay. So, one way you can define conflict is a result of unnoticed or unmet or frustrated needs. And so I just brainstormed this really quickly, but here's some possible needs. If you keep on asking why, you keep on asking why, you keep on asking why, you might get answers like this, right? What are some of the needs? A devotee really would like to be able to, to express his devotion to Krishna and do his or her service, as Srila Prabhupada said in that famous letter to Karandar, in an individual, spontaneous, and voluntary way, right? Respect or appreciation. Now, I know that, Trinadapi, Sunichena, and all that, but if we take it in the right way, I think we could say devotees sometimes need that. To feel trusted, to have facility to do our service, to see that what we're doing is contributing to Srila Prabhupada's mission, and to know that whatever I'm doing, this kind of ties in with what Sri Radhika was saying, to kind of know, if I'm doing this, I'm following Prabhupada. I think there's some, those are kind of some basic things that devotees have. And often if you see that you keep on asking, often conflicts in ISKCON go down to feeling some of these needs violated or absent. Okay? So, what to do? That's a box of chocolates. I don't know if you ever did this. When I was a kid, we used to get a box of chocolates around Hanukkah or Christmas time. And my brother and I always liked the milk chocolate, and we didn't like the dark chocolate. So the box of chocolates always ended up looking like that, right, with all the dark chocolate. Now I know dark chocolate's good for me, but we're not supposed to have, anyway. So we should be careful, try not to pick Srila Prabhupada's quotes like a box of chocolates, right? Right? Try to look at the whole of what Srila Prabhupada had said, whether it coincides with what inspires us or what we think should be right, whether it does or doesn't. Look at everything Srila Prabhupada said on a topic. So often we pick and choose Prabhupada quotes and then we write a paper based on and for some people that really convinces them, but those are the people generally who don't read Prabhupada's books very often. And then for those who do a lot of studying and know what Srila Prabhupada said on topics, they get upset saying, why is this person only quoting half-truths, and what about this and what about that? So look at the full picture. Yeah, you know this example, right? Because if you just take quotes from here and quotes from there, or you just read part of what Srila Prabhupada say, you only get a small picture of, in this case, the elephant. This is from I was also on the same airplane. It's a long flight from Denver. And I was reading an academic journal because it was part of my work, and I came upon this sentence, and I said, oh my God. That really, if I haven't seen this 20 times or 50 times in my career in ISKCON, what else have I seen? So an example of an attractor, in this sense an attractor means something that perpetuates something. In an interpersonal conflict is a strongly held view of the other part such that even contradictory information is interpreted so that it is in line with the strongly held view, thus keeping the conflict in place, right? And you see that sometimes, right? Yeah, for me, the classic one is you point out when Srila Prabhupada said something different, and then people start getting into, yes, but what Prabhupada really meant was, or Prabhupada really wasn't, and you start doing this predicating Srila Prabhupada's mind thing. And of course, I think that's, we have to be careful about that, right? And you also see this in the United States elections right now. I remember, they have interviews with people, especially after, anyway, I don't really need to mention one candidate. We know who we're talking about. Some of that person's followers say, I don't care what that person says, I'm still going to vote for him. I don't care, if he says something that even goes against, but I think, I don't, like that. So we have a tendency to sometimes block out things that don't jive with the way we see the world. And so we should be careful about that. That's why I titled this study, The Whole Prabhupada. So, what else to do? Actually, maybe before we go on to these last slides about some more about how to reconcile things. Any thoughts or questions? Yes, you better get a mic.
Prabhuji, why are we discussing Varnasrama today?
Why?
Why are we discussing? The reason is like, are we planning to implement Varnasrama system in ISKCON, or you are collecting views, or any other reason? Just so much emphasis is given, just wanted to know.
Yeah, there's so much on Varnashram this last 3 days. Yeah, I think that's a perfect question for Ramapad Swami. Do you want to answer that now, Maharaj, or you want to defer that to another time? Why we're here?
I think it's a good question for Tukaram. And
okay, so
and Shivram Maharaj similarly, why?
Yeah.
But very simply, Prabhupada said he wanted it. Now, there's the quotes that saying, don't waste your time because that ain't going to happen in Kali Yuga. Nonetheless, Prabhupada said he wanted it. So we're discussing what it is that he wanted and how to begin manifesting what he wanted.
Exactly. If Srila Prabhupada hadn't said what he had said, and like I said, of course, many times, but I'm just focusing on the morning walks in Vrindavan and in 1977, and we wouldn't be we might be sitting here, but we might be talking about book distribution, right? Or something like that. But Srila Prabhupada mentioned it many times, so therefore, and we quoted that from the Guru, the song we sing for Srila Prabhupada every morning, that we take his words as our life and soul. So that's why we're here. Okay? Anything else? In the back?
So, in continuation of that, of all the things that Prabhupada wanted and made very clear, like book distribution or standards for deity worship, why is this particular issue, what is it that is so unique about Varnasrama, that there is so much ambiguity or dissension, conflict?
Well, again, that's probably a better question for others. But maybe a few things off the top of my head. Because Varnashram is not spiritual per se, it's Krishna's system, but it aids us in spirituality. So we haven't really, especially when I joined in '76, we didn't talk about social life or anything. It was just, chanting Hare, our emphasis was on the 3 bags, right? The japa bag, the book bag, and the sleeping bag. That was, my whole life centered around that for 12 years. And so, social things are trickier than ninefold process of bhakti in one sense. Also because it mimics the caste system. which obviously, in some ways. And anyway, there's so many different reasons, and we're going to hear, I think that'd be, again, a better question for other speakers than myself. But, yeah, that's sufficient. Anyone want to add one or two, just to fully satisfy Matsu's question? Yes?
My feeling is...
You want to wait for the mic? It's just coming around.
My feeling is that we have a problem establishing a culture that can accommodate more people. In other words, we've kind of established a culture that can accommodate those that want to wear a dhoti and chant 16 rounds and worship the deity and do some preaching and stuff like that, but we really haven't established. And what does a culture mean? It means the behavior of a people according to their beliefs. How they behave. Like we heard about the Amish yesterday. They have a culture, they have a way of life, a behavior according to their beliefs. And we haven't really been able to do that for everybody, for the masses. And I think that we think that this establishment of Varnashram would accommodate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more answer to Matsuji's question before we move on? Okay. We're going to hear a lot more about these things. Any other questions before? Jayadvaita Swami. Wait for the mic, Maharaj.
In your continuum with values on being the most intractable subject matters for conflict, and on the other side, information and resources and relationships, where do principles fit in? Are they identical with values, or?
That's where I would put them, yeah,
Okay.
Values and principles. Yeah. And when you use the word principles, are you using it in the Prabhupada's 6th chapter Nectar of Devotion sense, or the word? It's principles and details, or just the more generic use of the term?
We hold these principles to be self-evident. There are certain as I think about it myself, it's a value, isn't it? There are certain principles, whether it's that everyone should have an equal say, or everyone should follow the authority, or everyone should do this, or no one should do that. This should never be allowed. This should always be allowed. Those sort of things.
Yeah. Okay, I would consider principles and values. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. We have 15 more minutes, is that right? Okay, so I have to go ahead a little bit. So these were just some more about how to address this, this discussion this weekend, and then the different views that we may hear. This is a famous quote from a letter from Srila Prabhupada. If we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. This is called unity in diversity. I am therefore suggesting that all our men meet in Mayapur every year during the birth anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. With all GBC and senior men present, we should discuss how to make unity in diversity. But if we fight on account of diversity, then it is simply the material platform. Please try to maintain the philosophy of unity in diversity. That will make our movement successful. This is kind of the theme of what we've called the SGGS, the Sangha of Gurus, GBCs, and Sannyasis that takes place now every other year in Mayapur. And that idea that these devotees who have a large portion of the role of leading the devotees in the movement come together from all different parts of the world with all different ideas of how to spread Krishna consciousness and even maybe to practice Krishna consciousness, but also have some cohesion, some unity amongst their diversity. We read that. And this is from Jayadvaita Maharaj's book on, presentation on strong speaking and clear thinking. A course that he taught in 1987 in Vrindavan, and by his empowerment, I've been teaching it ever since. So this is just one point. There's two different ways to kind of have arguments. One is to be creative, right? You may have your strong point of view, but you're also willing to listen to someone else's point of view. And you may even be willing to change their mind if they make a good enough case. That's a creative argument. And then there's attached arguments. You're committed to your point of view and you ain't budging. Right? You want to say something, Marge? Did you want to say something? Oh, I just said that the attached argument is you're not budging. You're not, you're fixed. So if if someone starts telling you that, Ganesh, Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, all same, right? That would be, we have an attached, we'd say, no, Ete Sakakala Pungsam, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. We're not budging from that, right? How to, where to go to distribute books? Well, somebody says the airport's a really good place. Somebody says, I'm willing to, I've been doing parking lots, this is what I did at least for years. I've been doing parking lots for so long, but if you can convince me that, concerts are a better place, I'm listening, right? So I would suggest that, and Jayadvaita Maharaj brings up this point in lecturing, that as far as possible, we try to, have creative discussions. Of course, when a principle is at stake, we don't budge from that. But a lot of things that we think we shouldn't budge from, we might benefit from hearing out the other person. So that might be something that we think about these next days here in Gita Nagari, thinking about, especially hearing from such exalted devotees, having an open mind is basically what it means. Okay? And know that differences are spiritual. This is another well-known quote from Srila Prabhupada. Disunity between individual souls is so strong within the material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to their having different opinions and leaning towards material things. Actually, in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. There is only one goal: to serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some disagreement over service, such disagreement is to be taken as spiritual. Okay? Now, of course, we know there's boundaries within what is acceptable and what's outside of that, but within those boundaries, which Srila Prabhupada gave us, pretty wide berth, we should accept those disagreements as spiritual. Devotees have different inspirations. And this is a term that I really liked. We may want to consider our own what's called naive realism, or I prefer actually naive subjectivity. But it goes a little bit like this. I'm a reasonable, rational, unbiased person. I basically see objective reality. Raise your hand if you fall into that category. God, devotees are so... Oh, well, we might as well finish the conference now if we're all unreasonable, irrational, and totally biased people. I was expecting everyone to raise their hand, but I guess you get into this whole humility thing. Okay, but anyway, that's... other rational people will share my views. Make sense? If they don't, they are either exposed to very different information, or basically we go to B. They're in Maya. They're biased, perhaps ill-motivated. Their thoughts will certainly hurt our organization. So consider if you ever have even a little tinge of naive realism or naive subjectivity in your mindset. And what to do. This was one of my favorite quotes because it's a letter to Balavanta Prabhu in 1972. And he's talking to Balavanta Prabhu about college preaching. It's a long letter. I for brevity's sake, I only picked a short part of it. And he's talking about preaching Krishna consciousness to college students. And he even says they're a little puffed up. Anyone ever have that experience? Preaching to college students? And he says, but they deserve it. They deserve it. And then he says how to convince them. But if we remain always absorbed in remembering Lord Chaitanya, how he converted so many intelligent men, even sitting for days and nights to hear them speak without himself speaking anything. And if we remember how Krishna was so much patience to explain everything to Arjuna, even Arjuna was like a fool. In this way, being always tolerant of others, and appreciate their points of view, it will be an easy matter for us to convince them gradually to join us. Now, I really like to focus on appreciating their points of view. So imagine 1972, university students in America. What was their point of view? I would say you could probably categorize it in one of, or all four, or three or four: sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Mayavad philosophies. Basically, I think that would sum it up. But still, Srila Prabhupada says appreciating their point of view, not necessarily agreeing with it, but appreciating. It'll be easy matter to convince them. So what to speak of Vaishnavas? and considering that we should appreciate their points of view. Or at least consider it, even if we still maintain a different approach. And that is, okay, there's 2 more slides. Yes. What to do, listening with empathy. I'm actually going to skip that. That's another course. But finally, don't forget your own convictions. In other words, we had all these things about, naive realism and appreciating other people's point of views and things, but that doesn't mean we go from, doggedly stuck to our point of view to just, a limp-wristed wet noodle, right? And just whatever you say, Prabhu, I accept. No, it's a balance between, being conscious of our convictions and maybe looking at why we have those convictions and if there's some prejudice maybe, or just how we came, not prejudice maybe, but maybe how we came to that conclusion. And then hearing another Vaishnava or other Vaishnavas considering their conclusions and then thoughtfully thinking what would be the best approach. But don't forget that we do have our convictions. Okay, we have 6 minutes for telling me I got everything wrong. Comments, questions? Pancharatna Prabhu.
In this last point about our convictions, you started off showing how there are differences. Srila Prabhupada speaks one way here, it speaks another way.
Right.
And I assume, or I'm expecting, that during the course of this weekend, we'll hear various presentations.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you give us some guidance in terms of how, if we find that our convictions, and some of these may be based on values that you, as you described, are not only from our life in Krishna consciousness, but are perhaps from our upbringing and our
even previous lives.
Well, I'm talking previous to Krishna. Say, you grow up in a family of academics who are very liberal and progressive, and
who could that be?
and that influences the way you think. So, and it perhaps even instills some kind of convictions in you. How do you deal with those in relationship to hearing from Srila Prabhupada if you find there's some difference there? And to what extent can we explore Srila Prabhupada's own convictions and trying to get down to understanding what his convictions, and to what extent were his convictions, is it in our frame of reference here that he also had an upbringing, he had a culture, he had a context to his convictions?
Although that second part is a huge question, which certainly we're not going to discuss and make some comment on in 4 minutes, or even I couldn't do it in 4 hours. There is some, just to know that it hasn't been neglected. I actually facilitate a group that's called the Hermeneutics Committee that is that part of that second question is addressing that. How they address it, I'm not going to say here, but but is addressing that. But your first question, I think one answer to that is we should be introspective and be aware of our conditionings and and if that doesn't coincide with what's clearly, let's say, a direction of Srila Prabhupada's, to be willing to let go of that attachment and take the words of the spiritual master rather than the words of our conditioned upbringing. If they're completely in opposition of one another. Now there may also be a way to dovetail our convictions or our previous conditioning in a way that can also serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. So, it's a topic by topic choice in my sense. I'm a little embarrassed to talk about this kind of discussion when we have people like Jayadvaita Swami. Would you like to comment on this, or Ramapad Swami, or Abhiram, or that's all? This is, Did I did okay? All right, then I'm going to move on to easier questions. Yes, Brajalila. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for a brilliant foundation, I believe, in my opinion, for setting the foundation for having this kind of discussion, this kind of conversation. Thank you so much. I believe it's about 4 or 5 slides before this one.
What was the topic?
Yeah, that one, the next one, yeah. Attach. You're committed to getting your point of view accepted. You won't budge from your position. It seems that if someone has this this mood of being attached, that it will be very difficult to have this kind of conversation in terms of an ashram. In terms of someone being an authority, for the question Jayadvaita Maharaj asked about principles. So one of our principles is to follow the authority, right? Follow the authority, that means the guru, as you just discussed. Now, if someone is attached to their point of view and won't budge, right? That may be an authority, then it might be very difficult for someone to offer their conviction, and probably would create even more conflict. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So how do we address that?
Call Brahmatirtha Prabhu. Just repeat the last part that's the actual question. How do we address?
A convicted person, a person that has their convictions. I have my convictions about how I might want to discuss Varnashram. I am presenting this to someone that's attached to their position.
I got it.
Okay? It may create even more conflict.
Well, there's different ways, but one way is that other slide on Prabhupada's statement about unity in diversity, and consider that remember I said there's boundaries, right, of Srila Prabhupada's instructions. Within those boundaries, allow for diversity, allow for and here we're talking about, allow for Varnashram. We probably started it after, so many years of Prabhupada talking about it. So if in general, within those boundaries, any leadership of any organization, let's speak of ISKCON, should encourage people that are encouraged in a certain direction, even if they are maybe a little, what's a nice, friendly word for who's very firm in their convictions. Okay, give them facility to use that firmness and that determination to do great things in that direction. However, also protect other devotees from, if that person's saying, yeah, but you're all just nonsense and Maya and forget about it, like that. Now, the only reason so that's, I think, a good general rule. That's probably, the house that could house the whole world, but, within boundaries, allow for that, that idea of unity and diversity from it, because we study organizational development a little bit, is just brilliant, to allow people to use their genius in Krishna consciousness, which some people could say sounds very Varnashram-ish. Yeah. Now there may also be, just to mention this, there may also be actually something called mental health issues. Seriously. And certainly ISKCON is not, people who come to our society are not necessarily exempt from having those issues. So sometimes people in certain categories can just be so irrational because they actually have some mental health challenges. Then those people, you may deal with it a slightly different way. Yes, do we have time? Oh no, we don't have time. Our time is up 1 minute ago. So, yes, our time is up. So let me just give you a little overview of what's happening for the rest of the day. So now we figured out how to have well, anyway, I don't know if we could joke about that. We talked about, oh my God, we're going to talk about Varnashram. Now we have breakfast, for those who believe in it. And then Satarupa Devi is going to be leading a kirtan from 10:15 to 10:45, and then 10:45 promptly, we will start getting the those clear presentation. Mine was just superficial one of Prabhupada. Did Prabhupada want Varnashram? And if so, what did he mean by Varnashram? And Tukaram Prabhu is he's our temple president in Laguna Beach still. Is that right? Yes. And also known for being a researcher. He likes to research things, so that should be a very enlightening presentation. Fasten your seatbelt. Okay. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.